introduce you to a professor and poet that I greatly admire, dear to my heart. He is the MFA Director of Creative Writing at San Jose State University. He is the author of The Buddha Factory and other books. I would like to introduce Alan Soldofsky.
Thank you, Kimmy. I should have brought the film version, but here I am. I'm going to say just one thing before I introduce the fourth laureate, the fourth California Poet Laureate of the modern era. And that is something about the first Poet Laureate of California of the modern era, Al Young. Al, who was a Laureate visiting writer at San Jose State and a revered poet, anthologist, playwright, screenwriter, novelist. He had a stroke a week ago. He's not doing great, but he's survived. And he and his family have a GoFundMe page. If you knew Al and want to help, check it out. GoFundMe for Al Young. I told them I would announce that. Let's send some healing poetry vibes out to Al Young tonight. And Al and Dana were friends for a long time. We've all known each other a long time. Life goes on, and then it begins to wane. On that note, I'm going to try to cheer you up. Dana Gioia. He's an internationally acclaimed, award-winning poet, former chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts, a native Californian, born in Southern California, of an Italian-American father and a Mexican-American mother. He grew up in Hawthorne, which is a pretty heavily Latinx community down by the LAX. So he went to school there. He did high school in Gardena, and then he went to Stanford. And he graduated from Stanford with undergraduate and a graduate degree in business. And in the middle of all that, he went to Harvard and got a master's in comparative literature. So he's a person of substance, a poet and a scholar, and a director. He published 5 full-length collections of poetry, most recently this one. This is called 99 Poems New and Selected. His poetry collection, Interrogations at Noon, an early one, won the 2002 American Book Award. He's also an influential critic. His volume from back in 1991, Can Poetry Matter? You can still ask that question, was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Awards, a book of essays, and is credited for helping revive the role of poetry in American public culture. In 2014, he won the Aiken Taylor Award for Lifetime Achievement in American Poetry. It's easy to place Gioia's work in the mainstream of American poetry culture. He has emerged as one of our nation's and this state's most important and most visible public poets. He occupies that role in the 21st century, following in the tradition of Carl Sandburg and Robert Frost, both poets who further democratized poetry in America and whose diverse legions of readers reached beyond, far beyond, an academic audience. Like those poets, Gioia has served as a teacher and an advocate of the poetic arts, a genre that has a growing audience in the United States, evidenced by people like you who are here, and has thrived in the neighborhoods and in the streets, as well as nightclubs and universities, while existing almost entirely outside the commercial marketplace. Dana's life is very much a California story. He attended school in the Mexican-American neighborhoods of Hawthorne. He attended high school, as I said, in Gardena, and then he went on to study at Harvard and Stanford. He worked in business for 15 years based in New York, writing poetry at night after business was finished. Then he quit, and he returned to California, where he settled in Sonoma County near Santa Rosa, not far from where his parents were living. But then he got a call from Washington, D.C. President George W. Bush was looking for a new person to take charge of the National Endowment for the Arts, which Congress was trying to shut down. So Dana was drafted, brought back to Washington, and became one of the most active chairs in the history of the NEA, gaining a $20.1 million increase in NEA funding from the Congress that was trying to shut it down. We can thank Dana for that. But Dana's true calling is as a poet and as a teacher. So when he left the NEA, he returned to California to resume his literary career. He edited many widely taught literary anthologies, some of which you may have used for your classes in places like San Jose State. He has had an endowed teaching position at the University of Southern California. It's a long commute, but it's great to have a chance to teach at that level of the university with those students. And Dana couldn't resist. His poems, translations, essays, and reviews have appeared in magazines, including, most notably, The New Yorker, Washington Post Book World, the New York Times Book Review, Slate, and the Hudson Review. Dana also has an active interest in music. I'm just warning you guys. And has written 3 opera libretti and written poems and lyrics that have been recorded by jazz and classical musicians. He's got a nightclub gig coming up. I'm sure he'll tell you about it. He's also an active translator of poetry from Latin, Italian, and German. Dana has founded and co-directed 2 major literary conferences. He is the Judge Whitney Professor of Poetry, or just retired from being the Judge Whitney Professor of Poetry and Public Culture at USC. He's no longer commuting between Los Angeles and Sonoma County, but that's what he had been doing. In 2015, he was named by Governor Jerry Brown as Poet Laureate of California. Last year, he finished his term as our state's 4th modern laureate, having visited all 58 counties, bringing poetry to underserved communities.